We'll go ahead and get started. Let's call the Johnston City Council meeting number 22-07 to order. Cindy, roll call, please.
Councilmember Cope,
Here.
Evans,
Here.
Martin,
Here.
Reddy,
Here.
Burkhart.
Here.
I want to welcome everyone that is in the audience with us this evening. If you are here for an item that is on the agenda, we would ask for you to wait for that item to come up and address the council at that time. If you are here for an item that is not on the agenda, there will be an opportunity under public communications to address the council. The next item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance, and I don't think we've ever had Aaron lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Yeah. We know you know it.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, justice, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the agenda approval. Jim, do we have any changes to the agenda?
Yes, one change this evening, item 5X will be removed from the agenda.
Okay. Are there any other changes to the agenda?
Yeah, I'd like to request that item, I believe it's 5W, it's the item related to the contract approval for the agreement with SGR for executive recruitment services, be moved to the non-consent agenda as well.
Any other changes? If not, do we have a motion to approve the agenda with those changes?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and seconds. Can you vote, please?
Councilmember Evans,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Reddy,
Yes.
Burkhart,
Yes.
Cope.
Yes.
Motion passed. Next item on the agenda is public communications, and we don't have any scheduled public communications this evening. Is there anyone in the audience or online that would like to address the council on an item that is not on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll move on to public hearings. We have two public hearings this evening. The first is to conduct a public hearing on the matter of adoption of plans, specifications, form of contract, and estimate of costs for the pedestrian ramp improvements 2022, and consider resolution number 22-92, adopting plan specifications, form of contract, estimate of costs, consider construction bids, and resolution number 22-93, making award of construction contract, and resolution number 22-98, approving contract and bond.
So open the public hearing. Open the public hearing.
We will open the public hearing at 7:04. Sorry, trying to do too many things at once.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. On March 23rd, the city received bids for the 2022 ramp improvement project in the Green Meadows neighborhood. We had two bidders for the project. The engineer's opinion of probable cost was $251,194. The low bid that we received was $335,870. The certified bid tab does show that Concrete Connections LLC was the low bidder. Concrete Connections has has constructed the 86th Street Trail, as well as the Pioneer Parkway Trail, and then they were awarded at the last meeting the Lou Clarkson improvements. Talked with Teresa Roche-Schaefer and finance there to see if there was money to complete the sidewalk project. There is money sitting in the sidewalk program fund to go ahead and cover the difference from the opinion of probable cost. Staff and the engineer would recommend approval of the project at this time.
Does the council have any questions for
So,
Matt?
I'm sorry. You said the proposal was 251,000 was the estimated bid, but someone bid for 330 something?
335,000 roughly, yeah.
That's like $85,000 more than.
Yeah, it's roughly a 33% more.
And that is due to?
What's that?
And that is due to, why is that so much?
I think the largest is due to the time of year that we are bidding the project. Just we're bidding it as we're going into construction season. We got a little bit later in the bid process than we wanted to. So I think that had a lot to do with it, with schedules being full and getting this project fit into somebody's construction schedule yet this year.
Okay. And when is this construction supposed to start? In spring or later?
Start this spring and be finished this year.
I'm just concerned that we have such a big amount to be paid, 33% or 35%, something is that?
Roughly 33%.
Yes, and that's a big amount to be spent. Is there a way that we can work out something different? Maybe we can start this construction later in the year that could help bring down the cost?
Not at this point, there isn't.
Is there a way, constructive way to make that happen? I mean, I'm asking for ideas to make sure we don't spend so much money on this, so.
Yeah, this is really kind of the kickoff to that sidewalk program. One of the other things that we're doing in this project that we haven't done on like our trail projects or other projects, because we're in a neighborhood, we are using sod versus a seed. And that was one of the amounts that was probably in that $10,000 to $15,000 higher than what our estimate was, or the engineer's estimate was.
You mean the cost of the sod is increasing the cost of the whole construction?
Yeah, it's part of that construction bid that raised it over the anticipated bid cost that we had in the
Okay.
engineer.
Now, is there a different way to make that sod, the seed, grass grow?
I think with the disruption that you're gonna have in the established neighborhood, that we're gonna wanna put the sod in. Otherwise, if we have trouble growing that seed, we'll be back in the next spring with the sod. It'll just establish quicker and get that neighborhood back to more.
Okay.
There are 110 ramps, and I mean, we're replacing every single ramp in that neighborhood. We are deleting a few and adding a couple, but there's approximately 110 ramps that will have to be reconstructed.
Yeah, fair enough. I'm not saying that we should not do that. I understand we need to do that. Construction needs to happen. But I'm just concerned about that 33% more we have to pay. And that comes out of taxpayers' money. So we try to think of ways to reduce that cost. So,
Yeah, I think in future projects, we need to bid earlier in the construction year versus as late as we did, so.
better planning.
That,
Better planning.
I think part of the, Councilman Suresh, I think part of the issue was this whole sidewalk program has taken a bit of time to get formally kicked off, and the engineer and Matt had meetings with the property owners and making sure everybody understood it. And so once now we have this first go-round completed, I think we'll be able to be on a better timeline. We have borrowed the money for this sidewalk program in the last 3 bond issues. So it is timely that we start spending that. We only have so much time to spend bond money after we get it.
Okay.
So we do need to keep moving forward, but I would hope, I know Matt and I both hope that now that we've had our first set of neighborhood meetings and we know how this is going to go, that it is going to flow much easier as we move forward into the different areas around the community.
Okay, fair enough. Appreciate that.
So maybe
Just-
following up on that, great questions, Councilman Reddy. Following up on that, we have plans to do another neighborhood next year.
yeah, well, this will be kind of that kickoff of our sidewalk
Right.
program.
Right.
So yeah, we'll roll into either, more likely, we'll be back in the Green Meadows neighborhood, doing the actual sidewalk program, and then we'll move on to Green Meadows West, and we've got mapped out to get through the city in 8 years. So yeah, this kind of sets the time of getting that project or the sidewalk program rolled out and started. So this will also help with those construction costs and figuring out future jobs. You know, there has been an increase in.
Okay, so I'm missing something here. So this installation of the sidewalks in Green Meadows West will take 2 years or 1 year?
This is just for the ADA ramps. We'll have the
Okay,
actual
okay,
program
okay.
to roll out the sidewalks in front of.
Will we bid again then at that time? Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand your question.
Will we bid again then at that
Will we
time?
bid ag- okay, okay.
Yeah.
So is the ramp issue a Green Meadows issue only, or will we have to do the ramps in Green Meadows West and every other part of the city?
Yeah, we'll have to do the ramps in Green Meadows West, some of them that don't have the truncated domes in them. Those are
Okay,
the
so
ones that need.
that's the And is this an ADA compliance issue? Okay. So what, as I understand what so we're taking $85,000. We allocate $500,000 for the sidewalk program, which is, my understanding, that is to help. What is that 500,000 for the sidewalk allocated for?
That would be, once we have the sidewalk program approved and rolled out, that would be to reconstruct sidewalks within those neighborhoods.
So
Plus any portion of the city's ramps that have to be done in that same area that we'll be going into I guess Matt and I maybe should have talked, but I mean, that was my understanding, is we'd get a whole area done, our part and the citizens' parts.
right, because I mean, the citizen in theory, I mean, the citizen's going to pay. You have sidewalk in front of your house that needs to be repaired. The citizen's paying that part.
Right.
That's not coming out of the city's 500,000, correct?
Correct, but we'll have to end up, with the program, we'll end up using our contractor paying those costs and then having
Upfronting it.
them reimburse us. If they join our program, the other option is they go out and hire their own contractor and pay that portion of theirs.
Yeah, I guess I'm still not 100% clear. So is this, I think one thing that would be helpful might be to have a kind of a putting together the plan for the sidewalk program for the outlines. Okay, you know, this year one is the curbs in Green Meadows. Year two will be the regular sidewalk program in Green Meadows.
Right.
Year three will be the curb. I think we need to have, it'd be helpful to outline that, because I think it's fair to say this sidewalk program was originally approved with our previous public works director. And so so we've just been kind of pushing it off. And I think it's been hard to kind of track exactly where we're going. I think we're doing the right things we need to be doing, and this is certainly important. I mean, we need to be ADA compliant. And I don't have a problem shifting the $85,000. I wish we didn't have to, but clearly we know with the bidding situation we're in, that's just kind of consistent. But I want to make sure that we do actually get into that sidewalk part of it, because I think that's going to be really important. And I get a little nervous when we're diverting $85,000, because that reduces the pool of money that's going to be available for that. So hopefully that doesn't limit too much the impact of the ability of that program when we do get into the Green Meadows neighborhood sidewalk part of it.
Yeah, moving forward, what I'd like to do is do ramps and sidewalks all as one.
Okay.
So that's the program moving forward. This is just trying to get that. This was really kind of a pilot program to get the neighborhood introduced to the sidewalk program and kind of get that money that we have borrowed spent. So we're going to start with the ramps, take care of the city's portion, and then kind of roll into the sidewalks in front of the homes, have that full sidewalk program. And then when we move into Green Meadows West, we'll be doing ramps as well as sidewalks, all as one project.
When you say the city's portion, obviously the ramps are the city portion. In the Green Meadows neighborhood, is there another part of the city portion?
The only time that would be is if we have steep grades that require us to go back the maximum of 15 feet. Over in the Green Meadows neighborhood, we're fairly flat. We shouldn't run into that issue. Per the plans, we haven't. We have a turning square at the top of that ramp that we'll have to do in some spots, not in all locations where we have a corner lot. But that would be the only city portion, as well as we do have, when we eliminate some of those ramps, we have to take out a street panel in order to put that curb back in. That would also be a city portion.
And when we have situations where it's against park property, the city would be responsible for
Sure,
that section as well.
right. But it would be helpful maybe to sort of say, okay, in Green Meadows, here's what is the city's share, and to visualize it a little bit, because I still think there's a lot of, I think there's still, it'd be helpful maybe if we had, here's Green Meadows neighborhood, and here's how we're allocating. We've got to allocate this $333,000 for the curbs, and then we've got the next part is the sidewalk part, and where we think we're actually going to have to allocate the city paying for a project, part of this segment, or the rest of it's actually being paid for by the neighbors. So.
Matt, I know you've shared a lot of information. Oops, I'm sorry.
I just have a couple questions,
ahead.
Mayor. You mentioned that the low bid here is also doing some of our other projects.
Correct.
You've discussed whether they have the staff, the equipment to do both projects at the same time in a cohesive manner?
We haven't awarded a contract with them yet, so we haven't.
So you'll have that conversation.
Have that conversation. We've had good luck, or we've had really good luck with them on Pioneer Parkway as well as 86th Street.
Okay, so this is the Pioneer Parkway people. Okay, I was very pleased with how they managed that project, because that was going to be my next question, was if you would discuss with them that as they move through, it's not, let's open up every ramp at the same time.
Right.
That they need to be constantly finishing their work as they move on. That way, we don't end up with, like it gets to be a rainy couple of weeks and nothing happens and everything is under construction and people can't get around. So I appreciate you're going to have those conversations.
Yeah, that's one thing that we were pleasantly surprised with on Pioneer Parkway as well as 86th Street, is they kind of button it up behind them before they just tear open.
Pass along my appreciation for that and tell them that we watch that sort of stuff. And so when it comes to these kind of issues where it's more than what we expected, we're going to expect quality work. So thank you.
I do think your decision to use the sod, especially given that it's an established neighborhood, is appropriate. So I think that's the right approach, so.
So Matt, I was just going to follow up on Councilman Cope's prior comments and just say, I know that the Public Works Committee has had a lot of discussion about the sidewalk program, and you've provided a lot of information, and maybe just what you need to do is just pull some of that information out, put it in a document, make sure that all of us get it.
Some of us former Public Works Committee members are, we feel like we don't
Oh,
know what's
I know.
going on anymore.
Well, we still have to bring the sidewalk program back to the full council for
Oh,
its approval.
absolutely,
So
yeah.
we'll give a little bit more depth to it when we bring that back.
I can't remember, what was the name of the previous Public Works Director? You're doing such a wonderful job. We don't even remember that.
Any other questions for Matt? This is a public hearing. Is there anyone in the audience or online that would like to address the council on this item? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing then at 7:18. We have two resolutions. Do we have a motion to approve resolution number 22-92?
Move approval.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Further discussion? Cindy, vote please.
Councilmember Martin,
Yes.
Ready,
Yes.
Burkhart,
Yes.
Cope,
Yes.
Evans.
Yes.
Motion passed. Do we have a motion to approve resolution number 22-93?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Further discussion? Cindy, vote please.
Councilmember Ready,
Yes.
Burkhart,
Yes.
Cope,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Martin.
Yes.
Motion passed. Item 4B, conduct a public hearing and,
Mayor, one more.
whoops, we have another resolution on that one. Do we have a motion to approve resolution number 22-98?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion? Cindy, vote please.
Councilmember Burkhart,
Yes.
Cope,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Ready.
Yes.
Motion passed. I think maybe I need to get my glasses out. Item 4B, conduct a public hearing on the authorization of a loan and disbursement agreement and issuance of notes to evidence the obligation of the city thereunder, and consider resolution number 22-99, instituting proceedings to take additional action for the authorization of a loan and disbursement agreement and the issuance of not to exceed $460,000 sewer revenue capital loan notes for design of the Little Beaver Creek Sanitary Sewer Segment C project. And we'll open this public hearing at 7:20.
Good evening. We're wanting to get started with the next segment of design of the Little Beaver Creek, or the Northwest Annexation Sanitary Sewer Project. What we're calling Segment C, which would be the stretch, Cindy's got the map up there, that would extend from Towner Drive westerly across Highway 141 to the Rickenbach Farms property. In order to fund that design work, we would do a planning and design loan through the SRF program, which is an interest-free program that allows us to borrow that money, and when we construct the project, we'll wrap the planning and design loan into the construction loan. So this action tonight would authorize that loan process so we could close on that loan and begin construction on your, or excuse me, begin design. On your consent agenda tonight, there is also the authorization of both to proceed with the section of their contract, which the council had previously approved, but didn't authorize all portions of the contract. And so you would be authorizing this segment for design. So be happy to answer any questions.
Did you just say segment C only?
This is just segment C, yes.
And how much loan are we getting from the SRF?
Up to 460,000, I believe.
Okay.
And it's a loan program, so we draw down on the loan as we go through the expenses, so we don't borrow any more than we actually spend through this program.
Other questions for David?
It might be helpful. I noticed in the map you had section B highlighted as well. Where are we at in section B? Have we borrowed the money, the actual 6.8 million?
Not for B yet, no.
It might be kind of helpful to sort of, here's where we are in each of these segments and design, and that would.
Right now, segment 1A, which I don't think shows up on the map, is the section that's under construction right now adjacent to the Crosshaven subdivision. Segment A is mostly designed, and we're waiting on final easements from Camp Dodge to construct. That's the long segment that'll go through the camp. And then as we're talking about segment C tonight, what we've done from an SRF perspective is we have to be in what's called their intended use plan. And so what we've done is put the entire project, all the segments, into a project in the intended use plan. And so then as we, like segment A, once we bid that project, we would close on the construction loan for segment A. And same with segment C, as we would get construction bid in place and a contractor in place, we would close on the next loan to fund that segment.
So it says on the map here that segment A costs $8,080,000, or does that include A and 1A both? Okay.
David, at one time, the discussion specifically on segment A talked about how it's possible that we could have some trails follow the alignment of the new tours. Is that still currently the thoughts in the design layout with the designers?
Not through the camp.
Not through the camp, but this is, I guess I'm talking about the piece that goes through Crosshaven. Okay.
Yeah, Crosshaven has in that particular segment, the trail does not follow the sewer, but there's a neighborhood trail in that area.
Mhm.
There's actually a trail on the south side of the drainage way. We're on the north side,
Okay.
but the north side also has a trail,
Mhm.
kind of winds more through the middle of the development instead of on the.
I guess, that's one of my favorite topics is trails and trails through areas that don't just follow a road section. And then I remembered you talking about it. So I'm going to say to you, I thought that was a great idea. And as you proceed with the planning, if it works out, I would say that's a consideration you should give the designers. Thank you.
And I would just add to that, especially those trails tend to be heavily nature-focused trails, which are things that we really are trying to encourage more of too, so.
Other questions for David?
Thank you.
If not, this is a public hearing on this item. Is there anyone in the audience or online that would like to address the council? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing then at 7:25. Do we have a motion to approve resolution number 22-99?
So moved.
Second.
A motion and a second. Further discussion? Cindy, vote please.
Councilmember Coe,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Ready,
Yes.
Burkhart.
Yes.
Moving on to the consent agenda. We did remove items W and X. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Cindy, discussion? Cindy, vote please.
Councilmember Evans,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Ready,
Yes.
Burkhart,
Yes.
Coe.
Yes.
Motion passed. Let's take up item 5W first, and that is to consider approval of agreement with Strategic Government Resources, SGR, for executive recruitment services for city administrator. And did anybody want to just summarize what that is?
What this is a contract for the search for a new city administrator. We went out for proposals and invited many firms to apply for the contract. We had 4 respond. We had the subcommittee of the HR Finance Committee that reviewed the applications as well as some staff, or the proposals as well as some staff. We narrowed it down to 2 firms that we wanted to interview. We actually did 2 interviews with the firms. And as a group, we came to consensus to offer the contract to SGR.
Councilman Cope, you asked to have it removed. Did you want to make any comments?
Yeah, I just basically, the only reason I asked to have it removed was just kind of, I know the folks who served on the finance committee were heavily involved, as were, I know Matt Greiner from the staff was involved. So we're pretty familiar with this. I think we're very excited about the firm that we've hired, and this process. This is going to be one of the bigger decisions that we're going to make this year, of figuring out who the next city manager is going to be, so, or city administrator. And so this was an important part of the process. I just thought it would be helpful for the other members of the council just to be kind of aware of it. So I thought that's why I just asked to have it kind of highlighted under the non-consent agenda. So
We had good respondents to the proposals. We had
Yep.
very, very thorough process, good discussion. I think we all feel very comfortable with SGR and where we ended up with them. So we're optimistic that we'll be able to find the right person at the end of this this whole adventure. So, any other comments? If not, do we have a
Sorry.
motion?
I do have a
Yes.
question. So SGR is a recruitment company that have, right? Is that right?
Pardon?
SGR is a recruitment company that does that. And they have done this in the past, and they have done for city administrator in the past.
They're actually a nationwide firm, so they've done searches all over the nation. And actually, the 2 firms that we interviewed both have done searches all over the country and have some experience in Iowa as well.
Okay, so we have some, did we use them for something else before this? No, this first time?
they were involved in the city of Davenport's city administrator search, transit director in Ames, and some other searches in the state of Iowa. And extensive relation, they've done it extensively. I know their CEO is somebody who Teresa has worked with in the past and has had some contact with. And so it was, we had four bids, and really then of those 4, we decided to interview 2. It was both the finalists were 2 really good firms. I think the members of the committee, it very easily could have gone either way, but I think we're excited about the hire. And
Okay.
I think they'll, this is a big,
Yes.
I think we all want to make sure that we have a field of candidates that, that are aware of all the great opportunities that they would have by being the city administrator of Johnston. And so,
Yeah, the next city administrator has big shoes to
Yep,
fill.
yep,
So
yep.
we need to make sure that it's the right person to replace him. So just my concern, that's the only thing I was at. So the
Yep.
city, you said the city administrator, they recruited in city of Davenport?
yes. And we might even be able, maybe it might make sense to, the materials that they submitted as part of their application, circulate that to all the members of the council so they can get.
All right. Thank you, appreciate that. Thanks.
Any other discussion? If not, do we have a motion to approve the agreement with Strategic Government Resources?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Further discussion? Cindy, vote please.
Yes.
Ready,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Burkhart,
Yes.
Coe.
Yes.
Motion passed. Moving on to the non-consent agenda, we have one item under the non-consent agenda this evening, and that is to consider approval of claims in the amount of $1,287,787.96. Do we have a motion to approve?
I move.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion. Cindy, vote please.
Councilmember Redding,
Yes.
Burkhart,
Yes.
Cope,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Martin.
Yes.
Motion passed. Moving on to city administrator comments.
Got a couple of things to share this evening. First of all, the mayor has signed what is called a Monarch Pledge, which is a pledge to support the effort to make sure that we expand and continue our use of certain habitats that would attract monarchs and other pollinators. This came to our attention through Councilmember Martin. She let us know about this opportunity. I shared it with the mayor, and we all agreed that this would be something we should be involved with. We already do a lot of things related to this. Actually, the biocells we put in along some of our streets on the east side of the community all have milkweed and different plants that will attract monarchs. And so it just becomes a part of your culture to when you have public projects to plan areas that will attract and make sure that those the butterflies and others are able to grow and expand in those areas. So we took the pledge. We're doing pretty well when you look at the criteria. We met several of the criteria they have, but they also lay out several more things that you can do in the future, and those are some things we'll be taking a look at to try to even expand on that program. I just want to let the council know we did have a meeting last week with our senior citizens just to follow up and talking about the programming that we're going to be doing, what we've been working on with our strategic plan that we started working on last fall. A lot of the conversation was really around communication, and with COVID sort of, being less of an issue, we have done sort of a soft opening of Crown Point and some of our other senior activities. And I'll admit, maybe we haven't communicated that as well as we should, because it's just sort of happening as we speak, and we are growing, the opportunities are available. So we're going to make sure that we do a better job in communicating what activities are available and opening up as we go through that process. We did advertise in the April newsletter that the senior board does have openings. Actually, we're going to reestablish the complete board because they haven't been active the last couple of years. And so any of the seniors that want to participate, they have the opportunity to fill out an application. And our plan would be to get the board up and running around the July 1st timeframe. And we've got a lot of activities and ideas of what the seniors have told us they want to see the board work on. And so we've got a long list of things that the board will be able to do that will be what our seniors have told us the type of activities they'd like for them to. So a lot to come from that perspective. I just want to let you know that we did have a meeting last week to just better communicate and update some of the senior members on what's going on. John is scheduling a opening for the Johnston Commons Playground. We thought it was going to be this week. The date that was chosen looks like it's going to be pretty bad weather. So just make sure the council's aware. And John has put the information out. That is scheduled for the 13th of April at 6 o'clock. John tells me that tonight, he saw tons of kids out there already. The playground equipment is up. We just haven't done the ribbon cutting yet. So
Yeah, I saw that this
report on
evening.
that.
A lot of kids are playing this evening.
Thank you, Council Mayor. Yeah, driving by, what was about 5 till 7. I'm not sure if anybody else was about that time, but it's quite amazing. There must have been at least 50 kids
Oh my
on the
gosh.
playground. There was almost no spots available for additional kids. It was a crazy, crazy.
I saw that. I took some pictures. Everybody was enjoying. I thought we are not yet opened it, but they're enjoying it.
Yep. The playground itself is safe. We still have a section of trail or sidewalk to add to it. It had to come in after the ramp was put into place for the wheelchair accessibility. So there's one piece of sidewalk. We're actually meeting with a contractor tomorrow to schedule that in, hopefully early next week. So it will be in place before the opening. So.
John, how are we promoting the the grand opening then?
Janet's taking care of that. I'll have to
Okay,
touch base
okay,
with how
Just
that's
want to make
going
sure
to
that
be.
plenty of people from the neighborhood.
Yep, we'll
are
make sure
aware.
that we get direct notice out to everybody. So, While I'm up here, the only other thing that I did want to mention is that there is an Easter egg hunt out here in the town center on Sunday this week at 1 p.m. So a little celebration as we work with the town center group and have a, hopefully, sounds like 70 degrees on Sunday is what I'm hearing. So cross your fingers that we have good weather finally for this. So
That's like predicting how quickly the meeting's gonna go.
I realize that, but compared to the weather we've had the last couple of weeks, we'll take it. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
Thanks, Joe.
I have nothing further this evening. Does anybody have anything to share today?
We do have one listed item under the city administrator staff comments, and that is to discuss zoning and subdivision regulation code update.
I think Cindy's pulling up a couple of attachments, but just wanted to do my monthly check-in on sort of the status of where we're at with the zoning code update process. The commission met last week, and we're going to owe them dinner or something when we're done with this, because they went until about 10 o'clock and only talked about zoning. So they've been really rolling up their sleeves and working really hard as we've kind of navigated through a various number of chapters. If you want to switch over to the other one. So what you have in the packet tonight and what Cindy actually has up there, there's draft sections of the code that cover landscaping and open space, architectural building materials, parking, fencing, and then a bunch of other smaller items were touched upon as well. Things like drive-throughs, outdoor dining, outdoor display, outdoor storage, those types of items. There's some starting pieces that are laid out there, and there's draft code. We've talked about landscaping in the past, and I know Councilmember Martin has been involved with, assisted with the committee, as was Councilmember Evans. There's been a lot of conversation about diversity requirements and making sure our landscape that gets planted is diverse. The commission brought up a pretty valid point. The first kind of round we went and said, well, geez, you got to have 15 trees before you can repeat one. And so we're continuing to work through that, kind of continuing to refine getting that standard right. So we're getting diversity, but we're also not being so overly regulated that we're at, folks are having trouble getting trees and those kind of things. Kind of one of those changes noted there. What I want to talk about tonight and kind of highlight a little bit, two areas, architecture and parking. If you want to go to page 11 of the PDF, Cindy. So where we currently are in the thought process on the changes to our architectural standards, when we did the design guidelines for the City Hall area, the town center here, we actually broke down materials into 4 classifications, sort of really, really good, really expensive, really nice materials, all the way down to sort of the trim. We liked how that worked, and kind of wanted to try to replicate that. As you know, we've had, many times we've debated, is this a permanent material or is that a permanent material? Under our current language, it's not very clear. And so the classifications, we think, will help do that. And so what we're suggesting is this table here that would break down materials into 3 different categories. Class A being high quality materials, the brick, limestone, those types of things. A Class B, which are good materials, but not as high as the Class A, and then Class C being more trim. And there is included in the packet, we tried to find pictures, most of which are from Johnston, of various types of materials, Class A, Class B, Class C. And what we've tried to do in that table is say that all structures, depending on the district, will have to have at least a certain percentage of those Class A materials.
I got that. I can't find the other one.
The presentation?
This one that you have up right now.
Yeah, it's the very last attachment on page 11.
Okay, so it's.
That one right there. So what we're saying under Class A is that each building would have to have a minimum percentage of that Class A. material.
Which one is it? The bottom?
Um,
Okay.
Class B, we're saying not more than, so in Class A, you could go up to 100% of your building could be Class A materials. If you have Class B, not more than a certain percentage could be Class B, and same with Class C, the trim, not more than 15%. Our current standard right now is 75% of a permanent material in most districts, 25% trim. So this would change that up a little bit, but again, we're classifying the materials a little bit different. The one thing I do want to note, our current standards have a requirement along Merle Hay Road, 62nd and 86th Street that any building fronting those streets within 300 feet has to have 50% of that permanent material be brick. At this time, we're not suggesting to continue that going forward. They'd still have these permanency requirements that we talked about in the different classifications, but they would have more flexibility and not have a specific brick requirement. Commission was comfortable with that, but it's a somewhat of a significant change. So I want to make sure the council's aware of that and is also comfortable with
Can
that.
you repeat that again then?
So right now, our current standard says 75% permanent material along Merle Hay, 62nd and 86th Street. If the building fronts it within 300 feet, 50% of that wall area that fronts the street has to be brick. Brick, not stone, not, and we've had that debate many times.
You mean it looks like brick, but it's actually a facade that's, a big panel?
Right, it has to be brick.
Actual mortar, individual brick?
We've allowed thin brick.
Okay,
In certain circumstances, but yes,
okay.
not stone, not other types of material. We've had that debate many times, and so brick has been the minimum standard. And so that requirement would not be carried forward as we've currently drafted the architectural section.
I would have kept it for Merle Hay Road. I don't know that I would have for 62nd and 86th. What was the discussion?
The comments we get from designers is it ties their hands from a design perspective, and we get pushback that it's that we don't allow enough flexibility in material types, and some architects don't like mixing brick with other types of materials. That's been the biggest argument we've had. We had a debate before Charlotte's was there. It was the Grill and Chill, and they came in and they wanted to do stone. I think their stone estimate was more than the end of paying them for brick, but we had this huge debate over whether they could do stone versus they ended up doing the brick as we were required. But
Yeah, but it seems to me, because of the discussions that we've had in the past, that we need to provide some more flexibility. I mean, just going with a straight brick standard seemed a little bit too restrictive. Again, the Charlotte's Kitchen building is a good example of that. I mean, the stone that they had proposed to put on it looked very attractive. Is there a way to maintain that standard with some flexibility?
well, I think we're trying to do that. So brick is obviously a Class A material, and so that's that's still one of the materials that they're going to have in a commercial district. They're going to have at least 50% of that be a Class A material. And those are brick, natural stone, glass, architectural grade. The commission talked about this one a lot. Architectural grade, commercial use cementitious panel rain screen systems, which is our Swiss Pearl on this building, the black panels. So there's a rain screen system that waterproofs the building, and then the panels are attached to that. Those are, and then manufactured or cast stone in a precast building or where it would have to be Class A. Again, 50% in a commercial district, 50% of those wall areas would have to be that Class A.
I guess what I would say is when I think about towns that are lovely, beautiful towns, a lot of the things that make them beautiful is the way the architecture works together. And a lot of that comes from because they're using materials native to the area or something like that. So I think you guys have invested years of conversation about Merle Hay Road and brick and a certain amount of feeling and scale about Merle Hay Road. And I would just say, maybe not throw it all out, because there's, your street lights could be the same. Putting trees in, pull it together. Architecture pulls it together too, and it makes it feel homogeneous. It makes it feel like it's a unit as opposed to things that are built in different decades and different functions. So I don't see that as a requirement for 86th, and 70th would be another street, or 62nd. I mean, I feel like you do have a lot of flexibility, but I'm going to be one of those people that say, I'm not ready to sign up on the no brick right now.
Councilperson Martin, I would ask you, what about this area, the town center area? Because this building doesn't have, in fact, it's cited as an example of a class A material that isn't brick. And I presume, all these other buildings.
I'm hoping all the other buildings are sympathetic to this building, yes.
Yeah, we did not carry when we adopted the design guidelines for this property, they did not have the brick requirement.
But
Yeah.
we've already got quite an investment in bricks, Greenbrier across the street. I mean, there's quite a few brick buildings already out there.
Right, but the fact that we didn't carry it over here, I obviously, I think the Class A, it has to be, it had, this is, I think, a really good discussion about that, but I also think that we have to kind of acknowledge that the building materials kind of evolve over time a little bit. It's kind of, to me, I look at some of these, like when I at the high school, the fact that it's not brick, that sort of surprises me. It looks like brick to me. So anyway,
I understand what you're saying, Councilman Cope. But we have set a standard along Merle Hay Road for whatever the 3-4 blocks that we've got, or half a mile, whatever it is. And I think before we throw that out, we should seriously consider what that would mean. I understand materials move on, but there's also something to be said for using that same material over and over, brings us all together, makes it feel like a whole instead of separate parts.
and all I'm saying is we didn't have that discussion when we were doing the design standards for the town center, which sounds like maybe we should.
David, when are we going to have this discussion?
Well, so I'm looking for, you're moving in the right direction, or we need you to look at this closer. I'm hearing we need to look at this one a little bit closer, specific to Merle Hay. And we can do that. We're moving towards the commission at their second meeting in April will have 4 or 5 other chapters that they'll be reviewing, and then we'll be back with a joint meeting in May. Should all have that should have all gotten a calendar invite last week, or I believe it's the 23rd of May. We'll have a joint P&Z and council meeting, and the idea is we'll do a summary of all these chapters. And so by that point, we'd like to make sure we're moving in the right direction. So I'm at least hearing some, hey, we really need to think about this a little bit more on the Merle Hay section, and we can take that back to the consultants and we can look at that.
That age-old question, what is a brick?
So David, I just have one question as we look, is this architectural materials, does this apply to all sides of the building or just the front?
Very good question. And that, as it's written in the code today, that the draft you have before you, it does. The commission talked about needing more flexibility. It came up in, like, you get a large industrial building, most of those, tend to back up to other buildings. And so we're looking at that specific issue.
Whether it should apply to all.
Whether it should apply to all facades, and is there ability to have some relaxation of that in certain areas and certain districts. And so we're going back and doing a little more work on that particular area. As a general rule, that's how our code reads today. Essentially, it's 75% permanent material on all 4 sides. We also talk about, there's some other sections in the draft that talk about other types of design things that we want to look at. So we talk about buildings that are 3 stories or more, which we don't have a lot of, but if they're 3 stories or more, they have to have some architectural design where there's a top, a middle, and a bottom, so that they're doing something, so it's not just this plain flat wall. We talk about, and this one's come up recently on a couple of projects, but we want to make sure that the primary entrance of each building is clearly defined. You know, is there a canopy, an awning, some architectural feature that you know when you pull in, that's the front door. And so we've added some caveats like that as well, intended to enhance really the front side of the building to make sure that those are, you know, meeting a high design standard. Other questions on architecture? If not, I'm going to move on to parking. And Cindy, if you wouldn't mind switching over to the other document and go to page 30. It's a little bit easier to talk from the table. So what we've proposed in off-street parking and loading is really a simplification of the code. Right now, we have a lot of provisions where if you look up a particular use, it'll say this many of spaces are required per square foot, plus you need a space for every employee at a maximum working shift. And like a restaurant, you have to have 50, you have to have one parking space for every 50 square foot, but only of the patron area. So what is the patron area? Is it the seating area alone? It's very complicated. A lot of times a developer will come in with a site plan for a strip center, and they'll say that we're going to have a restaurant bay, but they don't have any idea how many square feet or how many maximum employees will be working on a shift. And so what do we get? We get whatever number works to make sure their parking works. So it's not a good standard. And so we've tried to simplify and get rid of all of that sort of subjective stuff and make it more defined based on the square footage or the occupancy of a particular building. We've also tried to, we've got the use table that'll show what uses are allowed in each district. We've tried to carry forward those same use titles into the table for parking. So it's very clear if you're this use and you're allowed in this district, you can go right to the parking table and this is your parking standard. So we've tried to make that clear. I couldn't tell you how many uses that we get questions about of, where does this fall in our current parking standard? And it's a subjective area. So beyond that, the other substantial change in parking is that in general, we are way over parking most of our commercial users. Restaurants probably one exception where we get high demand, but the joke used to be, well, you have to have your parking lot for the Friday after Thanksgiving. Well, we don't need that anymore. And the Fairway is a great example. I think we've waived something like 80 parking stalls in that parking lot. Go there all the time, never have an issue parking. Their business is thriving. It's a clear example of our standards are just off. And so we've tried to right size our standards kind of based on some other examples and good case studies. And so that all of that I just summarized is reflected in the tables that start on page 30 of the attachment. That's the draft code. Those are laid out there. I don't necessarily need to go through any of them in particular, but I'll stop there and ask if they're.
That's a different attachment, David?
Yes. Yeah, the draft code or code drafts and precedents document. The second one there is it's all together, all the various chapters and talked about there. Sorry, there's so many attachments.
The one thing that I wanted to ask you, David, is we do get, occasionally we'll get people here that live in townhomes and they complain that there's not enough visitor parking.
Yep.
And can you tell me how that might have changed with this new, did it change, or if it didn't, if you did change it, how did you change it?
We are going to, this is any kind of multi-unit dwelling, so townhouses and up. The standard is still 2 spaces for every dwelling unit. You can use one of your garage spaces to count for that. But we currently require 1 space for every 10 units for guest parking, and we're
Mhm.
going down to 1 space for every 5 units for guest parking. So we're doubling the required guest parking, because that's the one area where we get a lot of complaints. The other thing that we're doing in apartments, and I'm not finding the right table here, but we're going to a number of units per bedroom versus number of parking spots for dwellings.
Yeah,
So when you're in a senior-oriented, everything's 1 bedroom, that's going to have a lower standard than if you've got a 3-bedroom. You're doing a lot of 3-bedroom where you might have more cars. So we're switching that standard for apartments
okay, thank you.
to better. And I don't know, if you catch this, but almost every apartment complex has some sort of waiver of the parking, and it almost always is related to more of a bedroom issue versus the number of actual dwelling units there, so.
Dave, does this cover on-street parking?
On street, no. There was a question that came up of, can developers count the on-street parking? And we have some examples, and the town center is a good one, where we've actually built dedicated on-street, and we've counted those 62W cadence, we've counted those as parking. But if you're just parking on a public street where you're allowed to park, that's not counted currently.
But is this thing that we're working on, does it cover on-street parking in any way?
No.
Okay.
A couple other things that we're addressing with the parking. We're suggesting to codify a sort of a shared parking calculation. That's something we did on the town center. We did in the PUD for the shops at Roughwood area, because they were proposing on the second building that hasn't been built yet, retail on the first floor and then residential up above. And so the idea is that if you're parked there because you live there, you're walking, and so we don't need a double count. And so there's a standard that, a study that was done by the Des Moines MPO that has a little table, and it gives you a way to reduce if you have certain types of shared. We are suggesting to carry that forward, and again, it's a table we've used in the town center and elsewhere. So that's included. We are requiring bicycle parking with some standards to make sure that our bicyclists are getting accommodated. We are addressing the need to plan for electric vehicle charging stations. We're not requiring electric vehicle charging stations as currently drafted. What we're saying is you need to plan for a certain number of them and make sure that you've got electrical capacity to accommodate them in the future. So we're sort of opening the can that we need to be planning for these things, just like we did here at City Hall. We put the conduit in, we've got the breaker space to accommodate it. We don't actually have the chargers out there yet. So
When do you think when will we start asking for that to happen? Because I just read a report not that long ago that said this is a huge growth industry. The electric vehicles are going to be 50% of the vehicles manufactured in like 10 years or something crazy like that. I can't remember what it was, but it's coming.
And that's, as we've talked about it internally, as a commission talked about it, it was trying to find the right balance of
Being
if we
prepared.
required it,
Yeah.
we're going to be the first in the metro, not
That
the first
is
in the
required.
country, but in the metro and the state, we're probably going to be one of the first. And so there's, the obvious sort of pushback that we might get from that. And so this was sort of, and a number of cities, Hoisington Kugler's out of Minneapolis, a number of cities in the Twin Cities have adopted this sort of approach of plan for it, make sure you know where they're going, make sure you have the capacity to do it. Because if you got to come in and drop a whole new panel in your electrical room to add them, it's a tremendous expense. It's still expensive when you do it, when you build the building, but it's a lot cheaper than coming in after the fact and then doing all of that work. And so, I think it's an open discussion on how far do we want to go. I think what we're trying, as we have it drafted, we're trying to find the right balance right now.
I totally agree with what you're saying, but I am wondering if you're going to have a parking lot that has 80 or 100 spaces, why we wouldn't start thinking that one or two of them need to be for electric charging. I mean, I think if you looked at averages, there's a heck of a lot of electric or hybrid vehicles out there. And if it's a parking lot of 100, I bet there's 5, 6. And I know there's going to be the argument that's free, that's going to be free energy to those cars, but I don't know that it has to be.
No, the electric chargers, as far as I know, in Hy-Vee, they charge for it. It's not free.
It's not free.
Not free. So, I mean, we can have electric chargers in any parking lot, but the owner of that business can actually charge for it.
Right.
But it might be a good idea. I agree with Ms.
When it
Martin
gets to
that-
a certain number of spots, if we're going to build 100, wouldn't it make sense to say 2 of them should be electric charging?
I agree with electric charging to be there in the parking lot, in a commercial lot, but I do not know the exact number, how many parking to make that argument, so.
Well, don't you think there should be a distinction between, so you have, I mean, so if you have parking for like an apartment or for residential,
Oh, yeah,
so that's a different situation. So you're parking there, you're gonna have your car parked there for several hours.
absolutely.
And so,
We addressed that in the section with the draft code. Boy, I don't know what page it's on, Cindy, sorry. But we've built the table out, and so apartments, lodging require 5% of the parking spots to be ready for electric vehicle. And then they go down, retail only 1%, food and beverage 3%. And this is a table that came out of the Twin Cities. It should be in there too.
yeah, I think that, we shouldn't have the same standard across all types of properties because, for a place where you're only going to be for 15, 20 minutes, more than likely you're not going to be using the charging.
Right.
But obviously, if it's a place a place of employment or a place of that, and I like the approach that's planned for it. It's hard to know exactly how quickly it's going to roll out and so many different factors. Plus, one thing I've heard is that the Midwest is sort of expected to be slower in adoption of electric vehicles in other parts of the country, so it's hard to necessarily apply that. Some of those nationwide standards, so.
Might depend on how much gas goes up.
Could be true too.
Well, as far as I understand, electric cars is by 2030, every vehicle manufacturer has to have electric vehicles.
How was that?
By 2030, all vehicles should be electrical vehicles. And that's kind of a guidance that the government has given, this federal government. So we should anticipate that most or not all cars will be electric cars in the near future.
Yeah, I would be willing to put a couple dollars on whether by 2030 in the state of Iowa, 100% of the vehicles will be electrical.
I mean, that's the guidance, federal guidance, I'm telling you that, but I think it'll happen sooner or later. Everything.
Yeah,
will be-
eventually,
So,
yes.
I
We'll all be
think,
dead.
yeah, what Martin says is that we should probably prepare for it now, long-term, rather than having it retrofitted. So-
Well, I think that's where the planning gives you the nice.
That's currently
kind
drafted.
of-
We're trying to make sure they're planning for it.
Yes.
And on the other side of this, it's, how much do we regulate? And, if we get to the high percentage, businesses are going to have them because their customers are going to expect it,
Right.
that they can pull up front and they can charge while
Exactly.
they're in their store doing whatever. So, at a certain point, the market will take care of it as well, but it's kind of in that interim period. We know the technology is changing. We're trying to find a little bit of a balance to make sure people are planning for it. And as they need to roll into it, they'll be ready to do that.
Yeah, if I were a builder, I'd be putting in charging in each and every garage.
But
Yeah.
that's the highlights of what I wanted to touch base with you on tonight. Those are kind of the bigger areas of change. Obviously, there's a lot of material there. The draft code sections that, if you look through it and you have questions, please let me know. The feedback tonight's helpful. I'll circle back with the team and we'll refine this and keep moving this forward.
So we've been kind of reviewing these sort of at big chunks at a time. Are we 60% of the way through, or?
Yes, we're probably, we're further along than it feels like because we're doing it in pieces and we haven't put it all together yet. And we're really down to 4 or 5 kind of big chapter areas and then a lot of smaller procedural and those kind of things. So our hope, Hoisington Kogler's hope is that the next month when we present to planning and zoning, we'll be covering the bulk of the next big pieces. Probably the big one that's out there yet is signage. You know, we've tackled temporary signage, we didn't tackle permanent signage. Although we got good direction from the discussion on temporary, I think that'll make that process go easier. We also haven't tackled subdivision regulations, which there's going to be a lot of changes there, but it's mostly because since we last adopted our subdivision regulations, we've also adopted SUDA standards for how we build things. And so we have conflicting requirements from subdivision versus SUDAS, and we're going to just get rid of that. Refer to the documents that we're already using. So there'll be some changes there, but not significant overhaul.
David, there's some pretty substantial changes throughout all of this. How are we going to make sure that we have, plenty of public input into this product when we're all done with it?
Yeah, so our hope is following the joint meeting in May, we have a good direction on the bulk of the code and the wholesale changes. And then we're not anticipating adoption until sometime in the fall. So that entire period really from June, July, August is going to be a public education campaign. We started this with some focus groups with some developers and designers that work with us on a regular basis. We're going to bring those back in and talk about the changes that we're making. We'll do specific outreach like that. We'll have to do obviously large notices to the general public. Along with this, we're going to be changing zoning districts, either eliminating districts that exist today, and so there may need to be zoning changes that happen too. And we've already had a meeting last week with Christine to talk through that process of how do we make those changes. So that will be a significant effort. Writing the code is probably going to be the easy part, and getting it out and getting the message out, making sure people understand it will be a big part that we'll be working on all summer long.
Great. Any final comments, council? Thank you, David.
Mayor, I just wanted to know, the council just received an email from Janet Wolverding, and she talks about what the plan is for promoting the Johnston Commons Park areas. So she was listening and told us what the plan is. So there'll be a lot of information out on that in the next couple of days.
Any other city administrator staff comments? If not, city council comments? Councilman Evans?
Do we know yet who's moving in?
I don't think any announcements have been made, have they?
No official announcements, and we've asked, and we haven't gotten. There's tenants. We've met with them on the architects on interior design plans and those kind of things, but they haven't done official announcements yet.
Well, I don't know if anybody else is getting questions, but man, I am.
Yeah.
And then the other thing, and Dave, the reason I brought up the on-street parking is I thought at one time we talked about some streets we'd park on this side, other streets we park on this side, fire hydrants, mailboxes. Did we ever come up with
We have a policy in any new subdivision, it's automatically no parking on the north or east side of the street. And then that is also the sides of the streets that we get the fire hydrants and the street lights on. So the street lights is so we can attach the no parking signs right to the street sign and right to the street light instead of having separate posts. So that's happening sort of automatically in all these subdivisions. What we have, however, and we're not tackling it with this project, is a lot of existing neighborhoods that don't have those standards in place, that basically parking is allowed on both sides. But luckily that's not under the zoning code, so we don't have to tackle that very sensitive issue with the zoning code. But that we're fixing it we fixed it going forward. We haven't done the retroactive part of it yet.
Okay. I'm going to ask you about a neighborhood where they've asked me to look into it. So.
Okay.
That's it.
Councilman Reddy,
A pass.
Councilman Cope,
I'll pass.
Councilman Burkhart.
I just want to extend my thanks to Councilman Cope for pulling out that item on the agenda. It was great to be able to see and read with a little more clarity where we go with picking our new city administrator. So thanks for thinking of those of us who don't get to spend so much time with that.
Councilwoman Martin.
I have nothing.
And I'm going to pass this evening as well. We do have one additional item on the agenda, and that is a closed session per Iowa Code Section 21.51C to discuss strategy with counsel in matters that are presently in litigation or where litigation is imminent, where its disclosure would be likely to prejudice or disadvantage the position of the governmental body in that litigation. Do I have a motion to go into closed session?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Discussion. Cindy, vote please.
Councilmember Cope,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Ready,
Yes.
Burkhart.
Yes.
Motion passed.